They tell you the road is addictive. They talk about the freedom, the endless horizon, and the steady rhythm of the white lines. And it is true. It gets into your blood. But what they do not tell you, what you only learn when the cab lights fade, and the only other living thing is a coyote howling miles away, is that the road is also a perfect vacuum. And a vacuum hates to stay empty. We drivers are temporary, we pass through, but there are things that belong to those quiet stretches of blacktop. They do not want to cross the horizon. They want to pull you down into it. I prefer not to say my name. I still drive the long routes through California and Nevada. I have paperwork to keep, weight limits to respect, and a family to get back to. No, after what happened last November, just outside of a small desert town, I do not pull over just anywhere anymore. I learned that some of those endless horizons are not empty at all. They are just waiting for the right kind of silence. It was a Tuesday night, deep into the early morning hours. My cargo was unexciting. Several sealed pallets of medical-grade plastic tubing. Not flashy, but heavy. I was pushing up the grade towards the state border. The desert air was that dry, cutting kind of cold. The only lights in my world were my own headlights, and the faint, sickly glow from the solar-powered emergency phones placed every few miles. I needed to clear the logs. I had been pushing the 11-hour limit and my eyes were starting to play tricks on me, making the white lines on the road look like snakes. I saw the sign for a dirt pullout. Not a real rest stop, just a widened shoulder where the highway patrol sometimes sits, and where truckers pull over when they have no other choice. This one was different, though. It was large, maybe a quarter-mile long, set back from the highway by a shallow ditch. And it was not empty. 2 trucks were already there, parked far apart. One was a flatbed carrying a massive tarped object that looked like an industrial generator. The other was an old primer gray cab over, the kind you do not see much of anymore. It looked abandoned, but a faint yellowish light was visible in the sleeper berth. I chose a spot right in the middle, far enough from both to show I was not looking for conversation. Standard procedure. I set the parking brake, that satisfying hiss and clack of the air release, checked my gauges, and shut down the engine. The silence did not just fill the cab, it crashed in. It is a heavy weight, that desert silence. I cracked the window an inch. I like the fresh air. Then I locked both doors, engaged the central lock, and closed the curtains. It usually takes me 5 or 10 minutes to unwind before I can even think about sleeping. I was checking my messages on my tablet when the sound started. It did not start slow. It was sudden. Tap, 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 tap. It was muffled, but close. Too close. My first thought was rockfall. The wind dislodging gravel from the cut bank behind the pullout. I put the tablet down and listened. Tap, tap, tap. The pattern was identical. It was not random debris, it had intention, and it was not hitting the ground. It was hitting metal. Hollow metal. I slid my curtain back just an inch to look out the driver's side window. The primer gray truck was still dark, its yellowish light now gone. The flatbed was motionless. The sound was coming from the ditch right below my cab. The ditch was about 8 feet deep, lined with jagged desert scrub and large rocks. The weak starlight barely illuminated the top. My cab door has no handle on the outside, just a slick grab bar, and the latch is recessed. Someone was down there, reaching up, tapping on the metal steps that lead to my door. I knew, deep in my gut, I should not engage. I should start the engine and roll. My hand was already on the key, but that curiosity, the same thing that makes you look at a car wreck, it held me in place. I decided to check, but I did not open the door. I have an auxiliary light switch, a powerful lamp aimed down the driver's side. I flipped it. The white light exploded downward, turning the ditch from black into high-definition reality. Nothing. Just sand, scrub, and the gray rock bank. No one was there. I stood there, hand on the switch, heart thudding against my ribs, feeling like an idiot. Imagination, the wind, the desert heat leaving the metal. I turned the light off. The darkness returned, thicker than before. Tap, 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 tap. The sound came again, but this time it was not on the step. It was on the door itself, right where the latch mechanism is located. Loud, hard. The vibration traveled up through the interior paneling. They were not in the ditch. They were on the truck. I did not look out again. I did not think. This was not a standard robbery. Robbers do not make rhythmic sounds to announce themselves. They break the window and take what they want. This was a game. I turned the key. The diesel engine roared back to life, the vibration drowning out the tapping. I did not wait for the air pressure to build fully. I did not check my mirrors. I slapped the parking brake in, slammed it into gear, and punched the accelerator. The truck lurched forward, tires spitting gravel. The massive weight of my load fought the sudden movement, the trailer swaying violently. As I turned sharply to the left, back towards the highway ramp, my headlights swept across the area where my driver's side had just been. I did not see a person, but I saw something. In the dirt ditch where my light had shown nothing only seconds before, there was a track. A long, smooth groove in the sand, as if something, or someone, had been dragging themselves along the entire length of my truck, keeping perfectly parallel to the wheels, low enough to stay out of the angle of my light. The track started at the very back of my trailer and stopped exactly where the driver's doorstep was. And as my headlights swept past, the primer gray cab-over truck, its driver's side door was now open, wide open. I did not stop until I reached the next major truck stop, 60 miles away. I checked my truck under the bright fluorescent lights. On the driver's door, right next to the recessed latch, was a perfect cluster of small, shallow dents in the paint. Tap, 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 tap. They were made with a tool or maybe a hard knuckle. Calculated, precise, and designed to make me unlock that door. I never pull into a dirt stop anymore. Not if the desert wind is blowing. My name is Travis, and I have been hauling freight across the western states for 20 years. You get used to the solitude. In fact, you start to crave it. There is a specific kind of peace that comes with driving a 40-ton machine through the Nevada desert at 3 in the morning. The world feels like it belongs only to you. But after a certain night last August, that peace turned into a very different kind of silence. I was on a secondary highway, a 2-lane stretch of asphalt that cuts through the heart of nowhere. My destination was a small industrial site near the border, and I was running about 2 hours behind schedule because of a mechanical delay earlier that day. The moon was a thin sliver, offering almost no light, leaving the desert as a vast black ocean surrounding my cab. I saw the hazard lights from a mile away. A small white sedan was pulled over on the narrow shoulder. As I drew closer, I saw a man standing by the open hood. He was not waving frantically. He was just standing there, hands in his pockets, watching my headlights approach. In the trucking community, there is an unwritten rule. You do not leave someone stranded in the desert heat or the midnight cold. It is a death sentence. I slowed the rig down, shifted through the gears, and pulled over about 50 yards ahead of him. He walked toward my cab with a steady, rhythmic pace. He did not look tired or stressed. When he reached the passenger door, I leaned over and pushed it open. The air that entered the cab was unnaturally cold, even for the desert at night. "My car just died," he said. His voice was flat, devoid of any emotion. "I need to get to the service station 40 miles east." I nodded and told him to climb in. He shut the door softly. As I started moving again, accelerating through the gears, I felt a strange prickle on the back of my neck. He did not look around the cabin. He did not look at the GPS or the radio. He just stared straight ahead at the road. "Nice rig," he said after a few minutes. "I bet your son, Leo, would love to sit in a seat like this. He is turning 8 next month, right?" I felt my heart skip a beat. My hands tightened on the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I had never seen this man in my life. I do not keep photos on my dashboard. I do not have social media stickers on my trailer. "How do you know my son's name?" I asked. I tried to keep my voice steady, but the cabin suddenly felt very small. He did not look at me. People leave trails, Travis. You leave a trail every time you stop for coffee in your hometown. You leave a trail when you talk to the clerk at the way station about how much you miss your family. Some people just know how to follow those trails. I did not say anything for a long time. The only sound was the deep hum of the diesel engine and the wind whistling against the side mirrors. We were traveling at 60 miles per hour. The nearest town was still 30 miles away. There were no other cars on the road, no headlights in the rearview mirror. Just us and the darkness. "Your house has that blue door," he continued, as if he were reading from a list. "The one with the loose hinge on the bottom. And your wife, Sarah. She always forgets to lock the back gate when she takes the trash out on Thursday nights. Tonight is Thursday, Travis." A cold sweat broke out across my forehead. This was not a random breakdown. This was a targeted encounter. I looked at him out of the corner of my eye. He was sitting perfectly still, his hands resting flat on his knees. Then I saw it. He moved his right leg slightly, and the fabric of his trousers pulled back. Tucked into the side of his heavy leather boot was a long, thin blade. The handle was wrapped in black cord, designed for a quick, silent draw. He was not reaching for it yet, but his hand was only inches away. I knew I could not just pull over and tell him to get out. If I stopped, he would have the advantage in the confined space of the cab. I needed a plan that did not look like a plan. I started to slow the truck down, very gradually. 5 miles per hour, then 10. I made it look like the engine was struggling. I began to faff with the gear stick, making a grinding noise. "Something is wrong with the transmission," I lied. My voice was shaking slightly, and I hoped he didn't notice. "I need to check the fluid levels at the maintenance turnout up ahead." "You should keep driving, Travis," he said. The flat tone of his voice had changed. It was sharper now. "The transmission is fine. You are a professional. You know exactly how this machine sounds." I did not listen. I saw the reflective markers for a small gravel maintenance area used by road crews. I swung the steering wheel hard, feeling the trailer groan as it followed the cab onto the loose surface. I slammed on the brakes, causing the entire rig to shudder violently. Before the truck had even come to a full stop, I reached for the heavy metal flashlight I keep in the door pocket. But I did not attack him. I threw the driver's side door open and jumped. I did not run into the desert. I knew the terrain was his territory. Instead, I ran around the front of the truck to the passenger side. He was just stepping out of the cab, the knife already in his hand, but he was off balance from the sudden stop. I did not wait. I swung the heavy flashlight with everything I had, aiming for the door. I did not hit him. I slammed the passenger door shut with such force that it caught his hand and his arm. He let out a muffled groan, and the knife dropped into the gravel. I did not stay to finish the fight. I sprinted back to the driver's side, climbed in, and locked the doors. I shifted into first gear and floored it. The tires spun in the gravel for a second before catching the asphalt. As I sped away, I looked in the mirror. He was standing in the middle of the road, cradling his arm. He was not shouting. He was not chasing me. He just stood there, watching my taillights disappear. I drove for 3 hours without stopping. I called my wife and told her to lock every door and window and stay on the phone with me until the police arrived at our house. When I finally reached a populated area, I checked my logs. I realized that the white sedan I had seen on the shoulder, I had seen that same car 3 days earlier at a truck stop 500 miles away. He had been following my trail for a long time. Now I never stop for anyone. I do not care if they are waving a white flag or standing by a burning car. On the empty miles of the desert, you are not just a driver. You are a target. And some people have been studying your map long before you even start the engine. Part 3. The Silent Yard of Echoes. My name is Caleb, and I have spent 18 years behind the wheel. Most of that time was spent hauling heavy mining equipment through the Four Corners region, where Utah, Arizona, Colorado, and New Mexico meet. It is a harsh land made of red sandstone and deep shadows. It is easy to forget what year it is out there because the landscape hasn't changed in centuries. But what happened at a private industrial yard last October made me feel like time itself had stopped and turned into a trap. It all started with a delay at the loading dock. My trailer was loaded with massive steel components for a drilling rig, and by the time I hit the highway, the sun was already touching the horizon. My dispatcher told me over the radio that the main terminal was closed for repairs, and that I should leave the load at a temporary transfer base 30 miles from the nearest town. It was an old place, surrounded by barbed wire, lost among the low mesas. When I pulled up, the gates were slightly ajar. There was no guard, no light in the booth, and no sound of dogs. Only a sign swaying in the wind that read, "Private property, no trespassing." I drove inside, and my tires crunched over broken concrete and dry sand. The yard was enormous. Rows of rusted containers and old semi-trailers had been sitting there for years, their paint faded and peeling under the merciless sun. I found an open spot at the far end of the yard, next to a long, low hangar made of corrugated iron. I shut down the engine, and then came that kind of silence that makes your ears ring. I planned to sleep for 5 or 6 hours and head out at sunrise. I pulled the curtains, turned on a small reading lamp, and started filling out my logbook. About 20 minutes passed when I heard the sound. It was a metallic scraping, slow, heavy, as if someone were dragging a massive chain across the concrete floor of the hangar directly behind me. I froze, listening. The scraping stopped, replaced by a dull thud. Thump, thump, thump. The sound was painfully familiar. It was the same rhythm old drivers talk about at truck stops when they want to scare the rookies. But I was no rookie. I grabbed my heavy flashlight and carefully moved the edge of the curtain. In the light of the dim security lamps that flickered on high poles, I saw movement. Between the rows of containers, about 100 yards away, shadows were moving. There were 3 of them. They were not running or hiding. They were walking methodically, checking every truck in their path. They wore no reflective vests or work uniforms. One held a long crowbar, another a heavy chain with a padlock. I realized what they were doing before they even reached my row. They were closing the exits. I moved to the driver's seat without turning on the cab light. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw one of the men walk to the main gate I had entered through. He threw the chain over the wings of the gate and snapped a massive padlock shut. The way back was cut off. Now the other 2 were heading toward my truck. They walked on either side of the trailer, staying in the blind spots of the mirrors. I heard their boots crunching on the gravel. One of them stopped right under my door. I could not see his face, only the top of a dirty baseball cap. He did not try to open the door. He just stood there and waited. Then the tapping began. First on the fuel tank, then on the steps. The rhythm was calm, almost mocking. They knew I was inside. They knew the gates were locked. "Come on out, Caleb," a voice said from outside. It was not a shout. It was a calm, almost friendly tone that made the hair on my neck stand up. "We just want to check your paperwork. We need to know what you are hauling." I knew that if I opened that door, I would never leave that yard. The steel parts in my trailer were worth a fortune on the scrap metal black market. but I suspected they wanted more than just the iron. I put the key in the ignition. My truck, an old Peterbilt with a Cummins engine, usually started on the first try, but that night I prayed to every god of the road that it would not fail me. I pressed the clutch and turned the key. The engine responded with a powerful roar that sounded like an explosion in the enclosed space of the yard. The man at the door jumped back, and I saw a short, heavy object in his hand, looking like a sawed-off pipe. I did not wait. I turned on every spotlight I had: headlights, fog lights, roof lamps. A powerful beam of white light hit the containers, blinding the pursuers. I slammed it into first gear and tore off. The truck, loaded with tons of steel, gained speed slowly. I saw two men running after me, trying to jump onto the trailer steps. The one with the crowbar swung and hit the side window of the passenger door. The glass cracked into a web, but it held. I did not head for the gate. I knew the chain there was too thick. Instead, I aimed the 40-ton machine directly at the old hangar, where I thought there was a through passage. The corrugated iron wall crumpled before the hood of my truck like a paper napkin. The noise was unbearable. The screech of metal on metal, the sound of breaking glass, the snapping of wooden beams. I flew through the darkness of the hangar, smashing through crates and old machinery in my path. On the other side of the hangar was a second gate, locked with a simple latch. I rammed it at 40 miles per hour. The rear of the trailer fishtailed, and I almost rolled over. But I kept the machine on its wheels and burst out onto the dirt road leading to the highway. I did not slow down for another 20 miles. The wind whistled through the cracked glass, bringing dust and the smell of burning into the cab. When I finally saw the lights of a major truck stop, I felt like my hands were literally welded to the steering wheel from the tension. I called the police. When they arrived at that base an hour later, the yard was absolutely empty. There were no trucks, no people, and no signs of cargo transfer. Only the hole in the hangar wall and the broken glass on the concrete remained to show it was not a dream. The strangest thing came out later. When the investigator checked the records, it turned out that this base had been officially condemned and closed 10 years ago after a series of driver disappearances. The owner of the company I worked for later admitted he had never sent me a message about changing terminals. Someone had hacked my frequency. Someone knew my route. And someone very much wanted me to turn into that quiet yard where time stood still, waiting for new prey. Now, when I see open gates at abandoned sites, I do not stop. I do not even look in their direction. Because on the road, there are places that exist only to swallow those who show too much curiosity. If you are listening to this story and are currently on the road, check your locks, and never trust a silence that feels too perfect.